For N17, there was the big rally and, of course, the surprise event at the end when Gwendolyn secured herself behind the gate at City Hall. And as you just mentioned, that was the first time that Sleeps really spoke publicly. The memorial to those who had died on the street was a big part of that event as well. Bard Prentice got the names of all of the folks who had died over the last 2 years and made little memorial tags for them with ribbons. And many of us went to the site at the City Hall. We had previously tried to erect some memorials, but the city had torn them down. And so this one was a replacement, as I recall it, of a memorial. And we read out each person's name and one of the people present who knew them, or if there was no one who knew them, someone else would put their names up on the memorial.
So tell me more about, so we're in 2 years post-Occupy
Yeah,
Eugene camp.
hard to believe.
We've hit a 2-year mark, 2 years. It's been a lot of efforts.
It's been Herculean efforts that have kind of arisen out of the ashes that we thought were ashes of Occupy. And as it turns out, they weren't ashes at all, but really a very nutrient-rich group of circumstances and people that have been operating now for almost 2 years.
What kinds of things did Occupy Eugene stir the beginnings of?
There have been a lot. One, Occupy Interfaith, is a fabulous group that crosses about 15 different churches and has been very involved over the last 2 years. It continues to grow larger. Obviously, Occupy Medical is probably the best known. Opportunity Village, where we are today, was very much an outgrowth of Occupy. There were about 4 of us from Occupy who started it, persevered with it through the mayor's task force to get it a little more accepted in the community, and then went to the mayor to get permission to use Opportunity Village from the Opportunity Eugene task force. So the other things that I remember, of course, are our newsletter, which has done more to carry Opportunity Village Occupy forward than almost anything except for Occupy Media, Occupy TV, Occupy Radio. The newspaper, the radio, and the TV, I think, have just become real mainstays in the community of keeping our message alive and growing way beyond what we were able to do during the camp itself. The last group that I see as being an outgrowth of Occupy, of course, is SLEEP, Safe, Legally Entitled Emergency Places to Sleep. I have been in and out of town for probably now about 13 years. And I think previous to my arrival here, Eugene had been quite an activist town. As someone who was only partially immersed here part of the year, it didn't strike me as much of an activist town back in 2000 when I came. The action seemed to have been smaller. Some of the really famous activists were here doing their thing, but the community didn't seem as wrapped up as I think they had been in prior years. With Occupy, the whole idea of activism, I think, gave all of these lifelong activists a new forum to reinvigorate. And of course it brought many people like me who had never lifted a finger in activism into the forefront. So I think it's just had a phenomenal impact that has continued to grow. And it had a big impact on the community. Some of us were talking the other day that it used to be when we'd go to hearings at City Council, there would be as many hate mongers testifying against people who were unhoused as there were activists and advocates and unhoused people speaking in a positive way. And I remember particularly when we were fighting the downtown public safety zone, which I credit Occupy with putting an end to this travesty of a country club downtown area where if you did something bad there, like jaywalk, you could literally be ejected from the entire downtown for 90 days. And I credit Occupy with stopping the downtown public safety zone. It dies in just a few more days. But what was notable at those first hearings that we went to is there were as many people hate-mongering as there were being positive. Recently, we went to a hearing on the new rest stop ordinance, and there were, I believe, 33 people who spoke in favor and only one who spoke against. And to me, that means it has now become socially unacceptable to be a hate-monger in Eugene, Oregon. And I credit that to Occupy and all the many other groups that were part of Occupy or have joined hands with Occupy. It's astonishing because the first sleeps efforts were, as you know, very highly orchestrated. Everybody was very trained. We were almost by then professional activists. We'd all been, working the streets of Eugene for a year at that point. And it was very controlled, PR managed. There was a very direct strategy behind each thing that was done. And then we pulled back as the blizzards completed their entry into Eugene. And then this summer, the folks who were living out on the streets, and it started with James Chastain, who had been one of the original Sleeps folks who camped out at the federal building and at Free Speech and all of the other sites. James decided he was just going to do it again. And he went under the Ferry Street Bridge, told other people to come, refused to leave, and soon there were, of course, 40 or 50 people who were spending the night there. And then the folks from Whoville split off, and again, there have been certainly a lot of us who have tried to give some support to these folks, but mainly the support that they've needed has really been to know which land belongs to whom, so that they can use their strategy of moving from one county owner to the city, to the BLM, to the ODOT properties, to try to make it very difficult for the police to move them without having to revisit all of the warnings and whatnot that have to be given. So it's been their strategies, their energy, their courage, their optimism, their perseverance that have made Whoville and the Fed Project, which are both under the banner of Sleeps, but are very separate groups of people with different styles, different ideas. And that's what good organizing, I think, permits, is a lot of different people with different styles, different beliefs, different ways of operating to still work towards the one common goal. And that's safe, legally entitled places to sleep. And we're beginning to get them. That ability to hold together is beginning to pay off. Originally, Sleeps was started almost entirely by about 12 people, really, who were by then, I feel, almost full-time activists. We'd all been doing this for a year, trying to get better conditions for the unhoused here, and we were really making virtually no headway. There was a lot of talk on the council and absolutely no do. So these, as I say, almost professional activists at that time really started the initial Sleeps movement and ran it through December and January and February. This year, however, in the summer, the folks who picked that up were strictly people who were unhoused. It was very spontaneous. It was initiated this time by James Chastain, who had been part of the first Sleeps group, but everybody had broken apart and gone their ways, kind of trying to get rested through the winter. And James just said, I'm going under the Ferry Street Bridge, and I am not going to leave. And he gathered, 40 or 50 people before it was over, and remained there for several weeks. And then after that, we, of course, had varying levels of arrests. James did it at that particular moment as a protest against the raid the police had conducted under the Ferry Street Bridge in the middle of the night, not too many days before that. And at the same time, BLM, ODOT, the county, and the city were all colluding to sweep the homeless off of their property at the same time. So it was an act of just rage on James' part, and there were many other people who were also enraged who joined him. And from that split out the Whoville group as the sites got too large. We were once again unceremoniously and unconstitutionally evicted from Free Speech Plaza, despite the court rulings, and so are now at the Fed, which Rights, Occupy, and Sleeps had won over the last months to have people stay there 24/7. So it's an ongoing dilemma, but I am so impressed with the people who so spontaneously joined with James, and it's their courage and their strategies and their insistence and perseverance and the ability to hang together. That's not easy when you're out on the streets, and almost everyone is living under extraordinarily difficult conditions. So I have greatly admired that part of the Sleeps effort, and delighted to see it continue to grow and manifest in ways that are comfortable for each group that's trying to promote this same agenda, which is to get more safe places for people to sleep where they don't have to worry at least about the police. When we first went out, we thought we were fighting for just the rights for people to be able to sleep without being awakened. But when we got to Free Speech Plaza, the traditional protest spot of Eugene, one of two, we found we first had to fight for our First Amendment rights. We arrived on the 10th of December, and on the 11th, Leanne Richardson issued a proclamation saying that the park was unsanitary, that we were vandalizing things, and we had to leave. We stayed that night in defiance of that proclamation, and the sheriffs did not bother us. So we left the next day in victory. We went to several other sites, were kicked out of those sites, and came back to Free Speech because we saw it was barricaded in. They were maintaining keeping it closed. And so we wanted to protest, but these were all really First Amendment protests. And Allie Valkyrie was one of the lead organizers on that particular. It was a Sleeps and Occupy protest. And she was arrested first on a closure, and then I believe it was 21 people were arrested on the curfew challenge. And both Allie's for the closing and the 21 on the curfew prevailed in court, and the courts found that Ms. Richardson and the county had in fact acted unconstitutionally. Oh no, it's just, we live in all this stuff. We kind of covered the synchronized sweeps, the police raid. Recently, the folks at Whoville, who've been out for 6 or 7 weeks now, for quite a long period, wanted to have a meeting with the mayor to, in fact, to ask for a moratorium on arrests now that the city are on ticketing for ticketing citations for those who are protesting or camping. She met with them for an hour, and we believe in a move more against the mayor than against Whoville. The police came in within 2 hours of that meeting and ticketed for camping protesters who had just been working with the mayor to build bridges between the housed and unhoused community. 2 days later, they issued another 12 camping citations. It is a huge disappointment to me that the police are still electing, because it's elective whether they go in and give citations or not, to do this. So a lot of Sleep's next focus is going to be on the courts, on being certain that everyone who's unhoused and who has taken a camping ticket, a jaywalking ticket, a failure to cross at right angles ticket, goes to court, pleads not guilty, asks for a lawyer when that's warranted, defends themselves when it's not, and in fact makes it so extraordinarily expensive for the city to continue giving these citations that they'll stop doing it. Just these tickets in Whoville over the last week will probably cost the city somewhere between $36,000 and $50,000 in police time, witness time, judge time, court clerk time to do that harassment. So we think that if we effectively clog the courts by asking those who are unhoused to stand up for their rights, don't just to ignore it, stand up for it, make this cost the city, hurt them in the pocketbook. We think that that will help the council justify to their constituents why they are not going to continue this harassment. Lauren Reagan of the Civil Liberties Defense Center is also putting together a constitutional case. And of course, she's already won those cases in municipal court and in federal court. So many of us were so involved and we were so immersed in all of this work. And I literally woke up one morning with the idea of safe, legally entitled emergency places to sleep. Because we had been saying, you know, what can people understand that everybody needs? What will make them get rid of this hate, this fear? And sleeping is so non-threatening, you know. And obviously everybody knows what it's like to have a bad night. So we decided to push sleep as the theme. And then this acronym just kind of emerged. And at that time, we were all really pretty frustrated and angry about things not happening. So when we first started this, it was more anger speaking. But as we moved forward with it, we were really fortunate. A new council person named Greg Evans came to join the city council. We had been marching for a year up to talk to them every 2 weeks, and nobody had ever addressed us back. Nobody had ever put anything on a work session. Nobody had ever put anything on any agenda of all the councilors nor the mayor, except for Opportunity Village, which we were forcing, and they were for the most part just, this might not be a good time, slow down. So when Greg Evans came to that council, everything changed. His very first meeting, he said, I'm hearing an awful lot of things here that just don't make any sense to me that are going on. I think we need to talk about that. How do we do that? He asked Kitty, and she explained to him right then how to get it on a work session agenda. And so his grabbing the bull by the horns forced the other counselors to address it, and they were afraid to address it. It's a tough topic, and I really have to compliment them, not George Bowling and not Mike Clark. I don't have to compliment them, but I do compliment all of the other counselors for jumping on board when once Greg jumped into the swimming pool, they didn't let him drown. We're very excited about the progress. I'm very impressed that the council, at a time when other cities are literally building concentration camps outside their city limits and giving unhoused people the choice, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go to the camp? And they can only leave the camp if they have a doctor's appointment or a lawyer's appointment. If they leave without that, they have to go to jail. This has happened in South Carolina. At a time when the country's looking like that, when we have all the crazy things going on that we've got going on in Washington, that this council has allowed Opportunity Village to start, and that's what they did, is allow it by giving it land. And that they're now, with the city manager's support, with John Reese's support, which is a new thing, starting the rest stops. We're excited because we're definitely getting the flow very gradually going in another direction. But I think it's very important to remember that we've got probably at least 2,000 people sleeping outside right now in our area. And Opportunity Village will only house 30 people. And the first rest stop will only allow 15 people to camp outside. You know, we're still a community that the primary family shelter is 2 weeks in a church and then moving another 2 weeks in the church basement to another basement, and the last day of school, all the children and moms and dads are kicked back out on the street. So even though it's a good program, it's not enough. So much has been cut back. The mission's been reduced from 500 to 300. We just got word that we'll have 130 less Section 8 vouchers starting almost immediately. So yes, we're seeing these wonderful glimmers of hope, but we really, now that this is a more socially accepted approach to dealing with those who are in house, we need everybody to get on board and make it grow much, much larger and much more effectively.